Good evening, everyone, and good evening to you, Jono. How are you?
I'm good, Mark. How are you going this evening?
Very well. And the reason that we're not here with Ian, or maybe Ian's not here with us, is that he's not well. We're well, he's not. So Ian's got the flu, so he won't be joining us this evening.
Certainly done the rounds because I know you were down with it. Your family have been crook. My family's been crook. I'm the only one I think so far who's avoided it. So
very good, mate. Yes, I was certainly smashed by it for a couple of weeks. And I went deer hunting towards the end of the second week, and actually I think it actually did me the world of good to get up on that hill and
fresh air,
get a lot of air through my lungs. I thought I was going to be coughing and spluttering all the way up and down, but I was fine.
That's good.
But it was
fresh air.
But it's certainly hanging around, and I'm just back from Nundle, where it was very cold and wet at times and icy at times, and I haven't got anything. So maybe it was good that I got it in the comfort of my own home rather than down there.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be a bit unpleasant being down there when you're sick. It looks like it's going to be pretty cold down there this week. They're forecasting snow potentially on the tablelands tomorrow, I think. So I think, if you're in Nundle, I reckon there'll be some snow coming down.
Well, when we left and we went in through the, I suppose, Vulture, or I suppose that's how you pronounce it.
Vulture, I think they're
Vulture or Vulture.
Yeah.
Way. You leave Walker and you turn on, I think it's called the Topdale Road or something like that. I can't think of it. Something Topside Road or something like that. That turn off there when we were going home. So we were coming out of Nundle and we were turning left onto, I think that's the Oxley Highway. There was a snow on road sign right there.
Yeah.
But I think that was left over there from the weekend because we were going out Tuesday morning, and the Sunday into Monday was a pretty tough night.
Yeah, because I was down Ben Lomond, and the first day that we were there on the Wednesday, so the Wednesday before you, and there was on the New England Highway there was signs saying snow and ice on road, and then it wasn't too cold, but it was wet. We had a lot of rain come through on the Friday and Saturday. We had quite a bit of rain come through. So, but no snow. It wasn't cold enough for snow. So.
Well, when we were first looking at it before this, the rain event and all rain events happened, which by the way we didn't really get much of, which was good. But it was saying that it was going to snow, but it didn't happen. So maybe with the rain comes in, maybe that affects it a little bit.
Yeah, well, we stopped off in Ballindine on the way down, just to pick up some wine, one of the wineries, and we were speaking to the property owner there, and she was saying that that the night before, so the Tuesday night, was the first night in about 2 weeks they hadn't had frost. So it shows you how cold it's been down there, and I think it just warmed up before that rain event. So, and we were hoping that it would be pretty cold, but I mean, there in Ben Lomond, we didn't even have frost. So, which is probably a good thing and a bad thing because I had the kids with me, but we had a nice cabin with a log burner and it was pretty toasty inside. Can't complain about that. But a bit warmer than you in Nundle.
Yeah, I used to hunt at a property at Ben Lomond, and that was a place that regularly got snow. They regularly got it up there. So
looks like pretty good deer country down there.
It was pretty nice. This particular property had the second highest peak in on the New England on the property.
Oh, okay.
And the guy who ran this property really looked after, in a caretaking role, a number of other properties. So it was a really great place to go deer hunting and rabbit hunting and stuff like that. Never saw any things there, but
we saw rabbits, we saw foxes. Didn't see any deer. But yeah, certainly a lot of rabbits and foxes around. And on the side of the road, everywhere we looked was just foxes. There was just so many around. It was crazy.
Yeah, we saw lots of, like on the road, saw lots of dead foxes and cats and things like that. And we saw a number of rabbits, proper rat. You sometimes see hare, but actually proper rabbits down there and down in Nundle. And we saw lots and lots of native wildlife. Unfortunately, the only wombats we saw were dead. We saw two little dead ones. They were only juveniles. They were only small ones, hit by trucks, I
Yeah,
assuming.
those trucks on the Nundle Forest Way, those trucks just go flying through. You always see cockases everywhere.
Yeah, that
unfortunate.
They got hit by a vehicle of some sort, which was a shame. But echidnas, last reckons he saw a quoll. I have seen a quoll down there myself, so it's not that unusual. Echidnas and the rabbits and hares and foxes and deer. Didn't see a pig. So yeah, and we saw some nice deer numbers too. We saw a bachelor mob of 8+ at one stage, and then saw them again in the same location. But every time we went back in there, it was fogged. That location was fogged out. We just couldn't get. And I don't mean it was foggy. It was fogged out like 20 meters. You can't see anything. In fact, it was so fogged out at one stage. Tim took his shotgun rather than his rifle. He thought, I'm literally going to step on something.
Yeah, I reckon so. Yeah. Well, that's good that there's still some good numbers in there because we were down there in late April, and the numbers weren't great. There was a couple deer here and there, but certainly no mobbed up deer. I know we're coming to the end of the rut, but there's so much pressure on that forest over the Easter period and the rut period. I think it just takes a bit of time. I think a bit later in the year is probably a better time to go, but you can never call it.
Well, we were down there for 3 days and we saw deer. Well, I saw deer on the first day because I shot it. Saw deer on the second day because I shot it. Saw a mob of deer on the second day. Didn't shoot any of them, but I wasn't shooting at the time. Coming back later that night, saw part of that mob very much in the same location, and just didn't see any deer on Monday. But I was wondering if that was because Monday the forest was so active because they were hauling timber out.
Yeah,
and maybe that might have been. Maybe it was just so active. And the thing is, we didn't really push off road too much. I had my son with me. We were just we would just go to a quiet place in the forest. I'd look for contour lines that were widely spaced together, so widely spaced apart rather than tightly together. So, flatter areas. And we would just see there's a vehicle track there, and we would just walk that track. And sure enough, we spotted deer. So
shows you don't have to go in the thick country all the time to find deer.
You might not find a big buck doing that. You might do it, in fact, but you might not. But we certainly saw deer in transit, and we were able to pick them up. As I said, one of the deer was basically around the car.
Lovely.
It was literally at the car. I had to kind of go. I could see it through the car.
Wow, that's amazing.
The glass on the other side is going. It's there.
You think with the amount of traffic in that,
I can see it.
You think with the amount of traffic in that forest that stay away from vehicles, but
yeah, well, it's funny because where we pulled up, where we shot that deer, which was very close to the car, because we pulled up and we were in, and there was no tire and it was wet, so you could see if there was any movement. There's no tire tracks going in. We went into Tugalo and just went, oh, this looks like a nice part up here. It looks relatively flat. Let's try this out. Drove in, and also the track had a bit of a stone base, so I thought this is a better track to be on. That was another thing I was considering with the boy. I didn't want to go anywhere too off-roady in case things got wrong. I've got my son with me when we get stuck. So I went down and we went down a little gully, and there was a place to pull over in the track, like a little three-way junction. I said, let's pull over right there, mate. Pulled over, and I didn't pull right over. I just pulled off the track and literally got out of the car, and I go, there's a vehicle coming, and then the vehicle comes down that track, that very track we pulled off, and it was a guy, and we gave him a wave, and he had his swag set up in the back of his ute, and he must have been leaving because the next day we went in there again and we found his campsite. He was camped up in there, and we met some other two young guys who are way up in the top part of Nundle, up in the old farm country.
Yep.
And unfortunately, they weren't doing very good at all. They hadn't seen really any game, which was a shame for those guys because I think they were pretty new to hunting, so that was a shame they didn't see anything. But they came up and said, "What are these prints?" And I said, "Mate, that's cattle." And Tim saw the cattle. There's cattle up there, and they were tagged. So So yeah, I thoroughly recommend hunting in that place in winter. It takes some preparation, but it's a real adventure. So it was really good.
And
But
what
talk about
which
Nundle, which there's a video coming out, and by the time this podcast gets out, that video is probably already out. So we're kind of doing that
forward to that.
future passing. Let's talk about rifles as a compendium to our caliber conversation.
Sure. So we're not talking calibers, we're talking rifles.
Talking rifles.
Sounds good to me. Yeah. So
I suppose to start, what brands of rifle have you owned?
So I have owned Krico, and I still own Krico, which is a German German rifle, quite old. I have a 308, which is actually the first rifle I ever bought for myself with my own money. Why did I buy it? Because it was cheap and it was in the caliber that I wanted and I could afford it. And then a few years later, here in Australia, actually, I found a Krico 22 secondhand in a gun shop. It's probably, several years old. When I say several, it's probably 30, 40, 50 years old. Still super smooth action, which the Kricos are renowned for. So I bought it and love it. It's super accurate. What else do I own? I own Tikka. I have owned several Tikkas, and they are probably my favorite rifle. And then I've got a Breda shotgun, but I know we're talking rifles. So yeah, personally in my safe, I've got Krico and Tikka. That's mine.
Okay.
What about yourself?
A little bit more varied than that. So I've owned the Stava, which is a Mauser, basically a Mauser 98. Seiko, Tikka, Winchester, and I've owned a couple of different types of Winchester. Rossi, and which was basically a Winchester copy, the 92. Chiappa, which I've just bought, which is a 22, and it's a copy. Basically, it's like the Marlin 39. Very similar to that. CZ. And what else is there? There's probably something else in there. CZ. Marlin.
Yep.
Marlin. And the more exotic, I used to own a M1 carbine made by General Motors, or specifically the inland branch of General Motors. So it was World War II, because they made firearms. And there was a thing called I used to call it an SAR, but that was a semi-automatic rifle. But what it was, I think the brand, it changed hands. It was an Australian brand. It was called Australian Automatic Arms, I think it was. Yeah, that sounds about right, Australian Automatic. And they basically built a 5.56 to tender to replace the SLR.
Okay.
So it looked like an SLR, but it was just like they put an SLR in the wash, and it was just smaller, and it shot 5.56, and it was synthetic, as in the grip and all that was like a nylon, synthetic nylon composition, not fiberglass. It's more of a nylon,
the composite top. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a piece of junk. It was rubbish. It was rubbish. I can look. There's probably people out there who love them. I could see why it didn't get the arms contract.
Yeah, there's a certain feel to a rifle for me. It's got to have that right fit, the right feel. The stock's got to be a good, decent material. Some of them just don't do it for me.
This just didn't work half the time. It had if I remember the cocking lever was quite far forward, and you're always trying to clear it, jammed all the time.
Yeah, look, and I mean, over the years, I have owned some other brands as well. I've owned the original Bruno, so that's the precursor to the CZ.
Yeah.
Obviously, when they were the original Eastern Europeans. So
when they were a Bruno, yeah.
Yeah, so the first rifle that I ever started hunting with was a Bruno 270. with the old ZKK action. Obviously, I've owned CZ since then after they were bought by America, and I never found them to be as good as the Bruno. The Bruno was such a beautiful action. I know that the action is very well renowned amongst the big game hunters for the Magnum, for the Magnum calibers. But yeah, the CZ for me, I bought a CZ back in 7x57, and people can refer back to our caliber chat where we spoke about that. But yeah, I had a CZ in it, and I just didn't really get along with it. It was nothing to do with the caliber. The rifle for me just didn't feel great. The stock didn't have a good feel to it. It was cheap wood. It just wasn't for me. So I sold that and bought a Tikka. And since then, I think I'm on my second or third Tikka. I just love them. They're such good workhorses. Why did I go for the Tikka at the time? It was a good rifle. It had the synthetic stock. I was living in the UK at the time and hunting in some pretty, horrible conditions, as you know. A lot of snow, a lot of wet, and the wood for me just couldn't trust it. I found, the potential for it to swell with the moisture, etc. So I went for the synthetic stock of the Tikka. When I moved to Australia, first rifle I went and bought was a Tikka because I just loved it. It was so accurate, it was so smooth, and not overly expensive. So for me, the Tikka is a great rifle. I know it's made I believe it's made in the same factory as the Sarko. I've never owned a Sarko. You've got a Sarko at the moment, don't you?
Yeah.
And how do you find that compares to the Tikka?
I haven't run around through it. I mean, look, it from my aesthetics point of view and from a pick it up and feel point of view, it is very, very nicely made rifle. I haven't run around through it. I mean, I've changed it. I've worked the action and I picked it up, but I haven't put anything through it yet. But it's certainly it's a quality build rifle. I have to admit that there is, and a lot of people won't like me saying this. There is the Tikka and the Sarko are very, very close cousins. They probably wouldn't be allowed to marry. They're very close. It's just a bit better in terms of not even build. I would say it just feels better in build materials.
Okay, it's a better source materials.
I wouldn't say build quality feels any better. It's a build materials.
Cool. Yeah. So for me, I mean, one of my hunting mentors, he always said to me that a Tikka is a workhorse. It's a tool.
Too. I had a Ruger. I forgot about that. I had a Ruger for years.
Can't forget about them riggers.
I had a Ruger. Forgot about that. How do I forget about that? God. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so I'll say it again. So what a mate of mine said to me with the Tikkas is that they're workhorses, they're tools, they're designed to be thrashed about, to be shot, to be carried in the bush, to be scratched, to be not dropped, but they can take a beating, and it's not something to be overly protective about. If you've dropped $3,000 or $4,000 in a Sarko, you're going to be very protective of it. Whereas with a Tikka, you can not worry about a scratch or two on it. And that's what for him, that's what a rifle was. He was a deer culler. That's what he did. He works for the old Forestry Commission in the UK, and he shoots a couple hundred deer a year. And for him, a Tikka, that was his go-to rifle. I think they're now being issued Sarkos, so that kind of says something. But they, I think he's on 200 or 300 deer a year that he has to shoot, and they have to be headshot and all the rest of it. But it was on his recommendation that I bought my first Tikka, and I've never looked back. It was a beautiful rifle. It was so smooth. I had the first one I had was the Super Varmint, so that was the heavy barreled.
Yep.
With the adjustable cheek piece as well. The big thick forend, which was a beautiful rifle.
Big beaver forend, yeah.
Yep, it weighed a ton. And I had a moderator on it as well, which added to the weight. But it was so accurate. It was beautiful. And it had the built-in picatinny rail as well. So and I guess that can lead us into, from a mounting perspective, do you like the picatinny rail? Do you prefer proper, the standard scope mounts? What do you go for?
Okay, so answer lots of questions there first. I've owned 1, 2, 3 Tikkas. I currently own 2. I sold my 2D3. The reason I sold my 2D3 was I wasn't using it. was it? It was a wonderful gun to shoot at the range because it was, it was lovely to shoot. You could shoot all day. It was cheap, but I wasn't using it other than the range, and I kind of don't like range only rifles. But what drew me to Tikka, and especially the Tikka T3, which is back in 2008 when I got mine, was they had a great left-hand range. That's what it was. Even not too long ago, it was not easy to buy a left-hand rifle, or you had a very small option or range of options. Tikka, when they brought out the T3, had a good range, and it expanded throughout the as the rifles became more popular. That the left-hand options grew. So that's one of the reasons why I like Tikka. Other than those kind of the obvious that they were a good price when they first came out. They were really quite competitive. You got a lot of bang for your buck. They were great out of the box. They had a couple of I suppose challenges to them. One was the plastic bolt shroud was a bit of a problem. The other thing was it seemed that the factory mounts didn't really like 30 cals. They failed. A lot of people, though mine didn't fail for about 6 years, but they did fail. When they failed, they felt you went, oh, okay, that's it, and you replaced them with Optilocks, and away you went. I've reviewed, owned, fired a lot of Tikkas, and they are tack drivers. To me, about that thing about being workhorses, there is no doubt they are a workhorse, but my Tikkas are not. I've spent a lot of money on my Tikkas. They are very good rifles. And I suppose my thoughts around that is always, if you give me a Porsche, I'm dumping the clutch. Okay. I'm going. If you put me in a Ferrari, I'm going to see if it can hit 300. Okay, I don't care. It's not going to sit in my garage. I'm not going to, put a ribbon over it and take photos. I'm going to use it. So, I don't. To me, that idea that if it's this kind of gun, you can be a bit rough with, and this kind of gun, no. If it's a nice rifle, I'm using it. That's what it's. I mean, that's what it's built for. Race cars are built to race. Good rifles are built to hunt with. So that's my philosophy in life. I'm not gonna buy a $2,000, $3,000 watch and have it in a drawer. I'm gonna wear it every day. I'm gonna wear it on the wrist, So, and that's how I've treated my rifles. That I look after them. They're very, very nice. I spend a lot of money customizing them, but they get used. In fact, one of the things that I turn over rifles is when I look at them and go, I'm not using that thing. It's going. And in fact, when I got the latest Tikka, which is the custom rifle, I sold my scout rifle, which was Maruga. I sold it because I said I've got 2 308 scout-like rifles. That one's going.
There's no need for it. Yeah.
So it's gone. I've got a better version. It's gone. That's it. So there's no. I don't have that kind of attachment to them. I want good quality, high quality gear. But if it's not being used, I'm going to move it on. So that's and in fact, there's a I'm going to have, I won't say his name, but there's a person who comments on one of the Facebook pages who's always a bit disparaging of us in our podcast, and he called me a Tikka cuck. Now I've thought long and hard about how that could be physically possible, and I'm unsure how it could be. But anyway, so yeah, so I thought, how would that work? But anyway. So yeah, I am an unreserved Tikka fan simply because when I wanted a nice left-hand rifle, that was the model to go for. Even though then it was still hard to get one. You had to order them. They took a long time. I think my rifle took 11 months to turn up.
Really? Wow.
Because at the time they were making them in runs. So they kind of said, we're going to start making the 3006 left-handers in July or something like that, you know. So you order it and then they get around. You know, it's not like they were all building it for you. They said, no, that's when we're changing over the dies to make those ones. That's when it is. And so, yeah, it took a long time to get it. And I learned a valuable lesson there. Don't get a PTA unless they have it in stock.
Because it's only valid for
I
6
think I
months.
literally went through 3 PTAs waiting for that rifle because they would just literally run out.
Yeah.
And they'd run out. So in the end, after, you know, so if I've ever had that situation after that, I would say, here's the deposit. I want it. When you know it's landed, then I'll get a PTA for it type thing. And that was it, yeah, because I did the 90 days. That's it. Over. Got a new PTA. 90 days.
Wow. Well, yeah.
So I'm chewing PTAs.
If the PTA is anything to go by, I mean, I've just done one recently and it was approved in 24 hours.
Yeah.
So
that's
the PTA
incredible. Was approved, but the rifle was.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So imagine how many you would go through then. So yeah, that's a valuable lesson. So yeah, wait till the rifle's here before you put your PTA in.
Don't do a PTA because you'll just, you know, you just keep on losing those PTAs. So moving to, I suppose before we move to mounts though, so you know, brands, I like Tikka, but I'm a lefty. My Ruger Scout was a lefty. It was an international, and again, when Ruger brought out the Scout, I was very interested in it because it seemed like the kind of rifle that I'd want, but it was right-handed. When they brought out the left-hand version available in Australia, they call it the International. It was like the Generation 1. They had the slightly longer barrel, but it didn't have the big flash suppressor on it. When that became available in Australia in left-hand, I sold my Marlin 3030 and bought that. So I went, that's what the Marlin's been doing. That's a better version of the Marlin, so that gets replaced. And that was a Ruger are a very good rifle. If there is a real workhorse brand, it is Ruger. They make very utilitarian but very nice rifles, and some of their stuff is really nice. Like they have in the bigger calibers, they have what they call the Safari. I think they call it the African. And there's some very nice rifles in those Africans, and of course the number ones, Ruger number ones are very nice as well.
That's a beautiful action. I love that number one. That's a dream rifle for me. Would be a 375 Holland in a Ruger number one. That's yeah.
They're only about, you know, they're tiny little things because they've got no action on them. You're basically sticking the bullet in the bore in a way.
Yeah, well, there's no mag and
that's right. There's nothing. It's like a shotgun. It's just straight. And I thought before we get into mounts, we should probably give some clarification about rifles and about the different types of actions. So if we kind of ignore or not get into semi-automatic or auto-loading actions, because the availability of those is very difficult for most people. If we look at the actions that most people have available to them, we have, you know, what we know as bolt action.
That's just standard, yeah.
It's standard, but in reality, we should clarify that that's actually rotating bolt action.
Yes, yeah.
And that is the fact that, you know, if you understand a bolt action rifle, you rotate the bolt because most rifles have a bolt. So that, you know, the bolt action can be, we tend to use that to describe what we call a rotating bolt. And in that rotating bolt, you have probably the two, you know, biggest categories is you have controlled or push feed. Controlled being associated with, you know, primarily with Mauser, and the fact that, you know, so that as you feed the rifle, as you operate the action, it actually has a grip or contact, controlled grip on that projectile.
Yep.
And it feeds in the philosophy behind that is that it prevents jamming.
Controlled feeding. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. It was a controlled feed, and for every dangerous game rifle there was a controlled feed because basically they're all Mausers. Yeah. And that was it. So that was it. So it was seen as, you know, in the rifle when you're in a clutch, when the lion's about to chew on you, rhino's about to stomp you or the hippo's about to drown you, you want to control feed because you don't get jams. However, for most of us, we run what's called a push action, push feed. That's just about every rifle there is nowadays. Push feed, and if you look at your Tika, that little kind of claw there, all that's for is extraction and ejection. Push feeds have, through better machining, almost done away with jams.
Yeah, it's very rare to jam around now.
I've jammed my Ruger, and the reason the Ruger jammed was that the Ruger Scout used the quite famous Ruger M77 action, but used it with a box magazine. And what actually happened was the box the magazine itself would slightly move, and it would cause them to jam. And the mod around that was actually to not use the factory metal box mags. There was a polymer mag that was made that was much better fit. Once you use that, there was no more jams. They just didn't jam again. It was just simply that if you were in a hurry and you pushed it, and if you kind of didn't push it at 90 degrees but kind of pushed down on it,
just change the angle slightly.
Just change the angle a bit and it would jam. And once you did, and I'd gone from Tika to that, and I was
yeah, the smoothness of it
to jam.
Yeah.
So you got push feed. So that's the rotating bolt, and I'm not going to go into the history of that because it's just there's lots there. But basically, you're either a Morse or a Lee Enfield. That's basically that's the arm wrestle way back then. You've got lever action, which cowboy gun. There's lots of different types of lever actions. There's single shot lever action. So technically, I would regard a Ruger No. 1 as a lever action.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Yep. It's just a single shot lever action, as opposed to a repeating lever action that has a magazine fed. Straight pulls, which are becoming more and more common, though they're not new.
They're not new. They've been around for a while. So the Blaser's been around for years.
Well, no, there's a couple of European militaries, basically straight pulls.
Right. Okay.
That concept, because it was seen as always faster. You didn't have to rotate.
Well, so I know the driven bore guys in Europe love their straight pulls because they're so quick. It's just
that's right. You don't have to rotate.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's one less action in it. So you got straight pulls. Then you get into things like pump actions. Probably the most common pump action rifle you see is that Remington Police pump action.
Yeah,
it's a 7600 or something like that. It's basically a pump action rifle, but Remington made a number of pump action rifles, and there was other brands that made pump action rifles. And then we're probably trying to think. There's no real more actions other than
well, you're gonna have a
brake action.
Brake action. So your slide lock, like your shotgun style.
Yeah, that's right. Rising bite, falling block, nausea.
Yeah.
Nausea. Brake, and then you've got those kind of so you've got brake action, but then you have like the block action, like things like I suppose martinis and sniders, and in one way they're kind of levers again, aren't they?
They would be. Yeah.
So there's that. So for most, you walk into a gun shop nowadays, the most prolific style of rifle you're going to see is bolt action or rotating bolt action rifles.
Yep. Followed by lever, followed by straight pull would be my three.
Followed by lever action. Though lever actions aren't that easy to get at the moment, since when Remington went belly up and sold Marlin to Ruger, there was a hiccup in production. You don't see as much in shops anymore. There's a lot of people chasing them.
Yeah, but as you said, straight pull seems becoming a bit more popular.
And straight pulls, probably the one that's most for us is the Beretta BRX.
Yeah, absolutely. Which
is actually strange because it's a straight pull, but the bolt is kind of
curved down,
like a bolt action, but it moves differently. So you got that. So you got your straight pulls, and then you got your brake barrels, your single shots and your doubles, and even you get into those weird things like drillings, which have 3 barrels.
Yep, yep, absolutely. Good old Germans love them.
That's right. They're all brake. So that's the kind of actions you're going to get. So for someone who's new and thinking about a hunting rifle, what you're actually buying is a rotating bolt action rifle, and it's called a repeater. And that is because it has some way of holding more than one shot in some type of magazine, either internal magazine, some kind of box magazine, tube-fed magazine, or whatever things.
30-30s, yeah.
That's right, yeah, tube-feds. But basically, so that gives you your ability to have it being a repeater. And the difference between a repeater and an auto-load or a semi-auto is that you have to manually cycle that action for it to fire once, eject, and load again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's probably the easiest way to describe that. So for most of us, a hunting rifle is in fact a rotating bolt, rotating, not rotary. Rotary is a different thing again. Rotating bolt.
Repeating rifle.
3 to 5 shots generally, depending on the
cartridge. Yeah, cartridge. Yeah,
depending on the magazine.
Yep.
So and some of those magazines are internal magazines to the rifle, so the floor plate style magazine. I've never owned a rifle with a floor plate.
I have. So my Brunos were with the full plate ones. Yeah.
With floor plate.
Yeah. It's a bit of a pain, especially for and if you're doing a lot of like climbing over fences or climbing up tree stands, whatever, you want to obviously remove the rounds from the rifle to make it safe. If it's if you can't quickly just pop out a magazine like you can with the Tikkas and most modern rifles, it certainly slows things down. You're making a lot of noise. You got to sit there and drop the plate out the bottom and take all the rounds out without you don't want to cycle the bolt either, because you've got a risk of an accidental discharge or something like that. So having a removable magazine for me when I'm choosing a rifle these days is an absolute must. I think it improves safety, and it's just so much easier to have a magazine. And you can have a spare magazine. You can have an extra magazine in your pocket when you're chasing goats or something like that in the state forest, and you've got a big mob of goats and you've only got 4 rounds, 3 rounds, or 4 rounds, or 5 rounds. You could have another magazine that you can quickly drop one and pop another one in. And as you found out when we were in the Pilliga, when you took out that mob of goats, if you didn't have a second mag, you're not gonna get half of them. So
that's it. And I suppose some of the criticism of an external box magazine is that hunting rifles shouldn't have box magazines, but that's aesthetics, because it's a straight line. Though if you look at something like the Seiko, they've got a flush mount box magazine.
Yeah.
So it's got the belly of that has the aesthetics of a more traditional hunting rifle,
but it's removable. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a flat mount box magazine. And I must admit, my 3006, I generally use the little 3-shot in that, and you can see it, but it's very, very, it's very, very,
very
discreet. Whereas with the CDR, it's a 10-round double stack. I don't care that it sticks out the bottom. It's there's comfort in that. There's 10 stack. There's 10 stack there. Though I never fill it up. I usually have it no more than 8, but it's there's a 10 stacker there.
Yeah, nice.
So that's it, and that's one of the and more hunting rifles are I suppose moving to that external box magazine, and there is, to me, they make a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
All those things you said, they make a lot of sense. The easiest way to clear a box magazine rifle is, drop the magazine out and open the action, and that's it.
It's clear. Yeah, absolutely.
And again, loading it safely, you close the action, then put the magazine in,
and it's closed in
that's right.
An empty chamber.
That's right. It's on it's a dead chamber. So
that's how I do it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's an important thing. I never. People say, what kind of safety do you like on a rifle? I don't know, because I never use them. I always carry an unloaded rifle.
Yeah, same.
Until it's time to shoot. So I always close the bolt, pull the trigger, click, dead, put magazine in, completely inert. So that when I'm shooting, the first thing I do is I cycle the action.
Yeah.
That's the first. I know I've done that for so long, and I've got into such a habit that when I was in England, and they shoot with the safety, so they load and have the safety on. When the muntjac came out, the first
so quick.
it was cranked and out shot of Barnes, and they went, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, sorry, it just wasn't have it. Sorry." And that's it. That's the first thing I did. Just cranked it.
Yeah, and so I do the same. I carry empty chamber with the put the mag in on an empty chamber. Quite often, if I see game or if I'm stalking in on game, I'll feed one, but I don't cock the bolt, so I don't use the safety either. I leave the bolt risen, so the rifle's not cocked. And then I'll stalk in, and then as I'm coming in to shoot, I'll drop the bolt down. And if something happens, if I lose, the animal moves behind a tree or whatever, put the safety. Then I'll use the safety, but I don't walk around with the safety on. That's not something I do. No.
So that's a people talk about 3-position safety and things like that. I really don't have a lot of learnt experience with safety because I never use them. I always carry an empty rifle. So that's basically the I suppose the heart of the hunting rifle, the action. And we've got that for most people they're going to look at a bolt action rifle, what we'll call a bolt action rifle. I suppose the next thing that comes in line is stock material. So where you and the rifle come together. So, and there's like everything else, there's a huge selection of stock material. But I suppose you kind of, if we're trying to categorize it, it's natural and then everything else.
Synthetic, I guess. Yeah.
Well, yeah, then that's a huge.
That opens up a can of worms. Yeah.
That's it. So natural being a piece of timber that's been shaped either by a stock maker or a machine into a rifle stock. So it's a wooden rifle stock. But then there's a huge variance from there onwards in
Well, there's obviously, even if you're just looking at wooden stocks, so you've got stock shapes, you've got the classic Monte Carlo style. You can have all sorts of different styles. You've got thumb hole where you can stick your thumb through, which I've shot with and I don't mind it, but would I ever own one? Probably not. I think they look better than they shoot. But I've shot one and I think they're quite nice. I do love a wood stock. I think a really high grade piece of timber on a rifle just really finishes it off, and I think it looks beautiful. I think it looks absolutely stunning. On your cheaper rifles, I find it can sometimes ruin the aesthetics a little bit, depending on the timber. They try and make it look like an expensive piece of timber when it's not, and it just doesn't have that feel to it. For me, I own both timber stock and synthetic. I prefer the synthetic simply because I'm not precious about it. I don't have to worry about, if it gets a big scratch down it, or, if I damage the grade of the timber. And I think the synthetics are probably stronger in my view. And they're also not going to be impacted by weather conditions. So I know some timber can be affected by humidity, change in weather conditions, swelling and shrinkage and heats, etc. With synthetic, you're not going to get that. So I just prefer the standard synthetic on most of my rifles, but I am a sucker for a good piece of timber.
Yeah, most definitely. I've got the receipts to prove it. So if we start with wood, we've got what we might call traditional timber, which is a block of timber that's been, one way or another, that's been shaped into a rifle. And as you said, there's grades to that, from basically packing crate to, grade 6 walnut.
Yeah, Turkish walnut. Yeah.
Now mine is Afghan walnut with New Zealand ebony end caps and grip caps. So that's kind of, and I think it was grade 4. And it took 2 hours to pick the timber. Literally, it's like buying a really good suit. It took literally 2 hours to pick the timber itself. So, and it's it's custom, so it's built to me. It's my length, so people pick it up and they find it a bit long and stuff like that because it's built to me. So you've got that, and then you've got like laminated timber, which is
Yep.
a Ruger was a laminated timber. It was a very nice rifle, and it was laminated. And I did notice that there's this manufactured timbers coming more and more. I know, I'm pretty sure Marlin used to use it in one of their rifles. They used to have the Marlin 336 used to have an American walnut and this American hardwood, which was the cheaper one. And I'm pretty sure that was manufactured timber. I might be wrong, but I was reading an ad by a European gun maker, and they were doing manufactured timber. So it had less walnut than other things, and it's basically kiln dried and put in a 30-ton press and pressed together. But basically, it's manufactured timber. So there's as you said, you can buy pretty cheap bits of wood.
Yeah.
And you can buy it, and and if you get into shotguns, then you just go up another 6 levels.
Oh, absolutely.
Of timber,
And I guess you mentioned with the laminates as well. I mean, that's not a bad piece of timber. For me, I don't like it when they do all the different colors and they make all the fancy patterns and that. For me, that's just not for me. I know it's personal preference, but I'm not a big fan of the multicolored laminates. But again, if that's your thing, then you've got the option to fully customize it.
Well, that's the thing. Some of the laminates are quite discreet, while others are really, really, they play on the laminate. The Ruger had a slight greenness to the laminate.
Yeah.
And it was, look, I thought that was a really good stock. I didn't think much of it. That Ruger was an interesting rifle in that it always exceeded my expectations. I kind of bought it as basically a beta. I thought I'm just going to buy this thing, and I'm just literally going to buy this thing and not care about it. But I realized it was a lot better than I thought it was from a manufacturing point of view. It shot a hell of a lot better than I ever gave it credit for, and it was always better than I expected it to be. And the stock was an example. It was a laminate stock, and I thought, oh, it'd be a bit crappy. No, it was a really well made laminate stock.
So I guess you've mentioned that the Ruger was a Scout. What's the difference between a Scout and a normal rifle?
Okay, so there's a shit fight ready to happen. There was a guy called Jeff Cooper who came up with this concept of the Scout rifle, and I'm not going to summarize it because that's another 3 podcasts by itself. Basically, he came up with this idea. It was to be a bolt action rifle of a certain weight and size that was able to engage medium-sized game, including humans, out to 300 meters.
Okay.
So it was this kind of like, a scout rifle. You could be on a horse, you could be traveling through somewhere. You had this rifle that you could use for, getting meat, for protection, for all these kind of things. So some of the many requirements he came up with was about its caliber. It had to be the caliber of the standard military caliber, so 308. And it had to have a higher capacity, so it had to have a box mag. Had to be under a certain weight. I think the Ruger Scout was always a little bit over, but it was regarded because the Ruger Scout is actually a gun sight scout, and GUNSITE, and gun sight is a shooting school in the United States that Jeff Cooper kind of initiated. So it was but the first Scout rifle that he put his name to, I think, was those Steyr Scouts.
Oh, yeah.
The built-in bipod and all that stuff. But it was so that was the Ruger Scout. And the Ruger Scout, from a rifling point of view, was just basically this different version of the Ruger M77 Action, which is Ruger's standard action, just like Remington's is the 700. It was their standard action, which is basically a detuned, commercialized Mauser. They kind of looked at the Mauser after World War II and said, "Oh yeah," well, and that's basically what they got. So if you get into stocks, so you've got wood of varying types of wood, and then you get into all the other stuff, and this is where you get all sorts of things. So you've got like metal. So you got, you know, skeleton stocks, but you've also got your common things now is your chassis for, you know, guys, the practical long range chassis. You've got various types of synthetic material from basically nylon through to various composites. You've got fiberglass composites and fiberglass / carbon composite materials. That means the stock that I run is a composite stock.
Composite, yeah.
Stock.
Get that?
Yeah. So you've got, you know, so you've got that whole range. You've got those things like the Ruger, what we used to call the boat paddles, which were literally those plastic stocks. So like,
oh yeah, those are horrible.
you know,
Yeah.
well, strange enough, they've become this big collectible thing. Those things, boat paddles. You know, when they came out, I went, "What the? That's the crappiest thing I've ever seen."
Yeah, those the green ones, weren't they? With the
basically, you know, it was like inletted plastic, and I think they actually had a bit of metal on them to give them just a bit of, you know, wear and tear, so they used to bump against things. But they used to call them canoe paddles or boat paddles. You know, that's what they look like. They look like a paddle. So you've got all those kind of varying materials, you know, to make a stock. And then, of course, you get into stock design. So, as you said, it's thumb hole and things like Monte Carlo, which refer more importantly to the comb. So where you put your cheek, and your more traditional pancake cheek pieces, or stocks that are neither left or right-handed, they're smooth. So they're ambidextrous stocks.
You got the adjustable cheek pieces now as well.
Adjustable cheek pieces. You got lots of different designs and concepts coming in there. My custom stock that I got made was initially he thought I should go on Monte Carlo, but he made a very much a traditional African rifle stock with the slightly higher comb, but you really can't tell by looking at it. So, you know, rather thin throughout the stock. So the idea being you can grab it from any angle and shoot it from any angle. Whereas the latest rifle, the CDR has, and a lot of people have commented on that, it has a very wide grip and it has almost that what they call that vertical grip. So it's quite a straight drop. Most people who have picked up that rifle don't like that grip. They think it's too big. I actually find it really good.
Yeah. Well, and talking about that I know on the CTX and I think the T3Xs and that, you can actually adjust those. You can actually change out the grip, so you can adjust it to personal preference.
Scales on to make the grip wide. Yeah. But it's actually quite a big grip, and as I said, I've had friends pick it up and kind of go, "Oh, that's really odd." But what you actually find is that with that rifle, when you're shooting it offhand, that big grip really comes into play.
Yeah.
It anchors that rifle very well as an offhand shooter. So there's all sorts of design issues there with stock. So again, from a first time hunting rifle purchaser, we're going to look at a bolt action rifle, and we want what we might regard as a hunting stock. There's a myriad of stocks you can look at, and I suppose if you would draw the line, stocks either lean more towards target or they lean more towards hunting, depending on what you want. So things like thumb hole, that's primarily a target.
Yep.
Idea that's kind of migrated a little bit over to hunting, but then you get into things like the chassis and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's more your tactical stuff.
Doesn't mean you can't hunt with those things. You can certainly hunt with them, but their primary purpose is one or the other. So
you're seeing a lot of those tactical style stocks now. I wouldn't really want to carry one in the field, but that's certainly for the hitting the range, there's nothing wrong with that.
So yeah, so if you need to think about what your primary purpose for that rifle is. If it's more hitting the range, then you want to lean more towards a range style stock. And even you mentioned it before with the super varmint and that what we call the beaver tail forend.
Mhm.
What the difference between a hunting forend and a beaver tail forend is the beaver tail forend is fatter and flatter
Yeah, very
because it's
fat, very
meant to
flat.
design to sit on a rest,
Yep,
sit on
absolutely.
something flat. Where
Varmint rifle. Yeah.
that's right. Whereas a hunting rifle is that forend is designed for you to hold it, so it has a different shape and its width is different as well. So we need to give that some consideration about where we're going to go. One of the considerations, if you're a righty, so if you're one of the lucky ones and you get to have full choice of anything, is the actual length of the stock from the factory.
Yeah.
There's a number of rifles that over time I've quite liked, but I've never been able to own because they're too short.
Yeah. So I find for me the Ruger is too short. I struggle with the Ruger when I've tried one. I've tried a few of them. The Rugers and the Brownings I find can be a bit short in the stock for me. I struggle a little bit with fit. It just doesn't feel comfortable. I find them too hunched up.
Yeah. Well, the Scout was the benefit of the Scout was it was primarily supposed to be short, but what they did was you could actually space out the stock. It came with spaces to make it longer. But yeah, I've always found, for instance, Browning to be a very short rifle, and some of the Browning rifles have been lovely over the years.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The A bolts and the X bolts and things like that, really, really quite nice looking rifles. Pick them up. They're built for someone 5'8".
Yeah, absolutely. I struggle with them. I struggle with them as well. Yeah.
So that's a that's a consideration when you're thinking about rifle and you're thinking about brand. So you think if you've got a picture now, you're designing what I want, whatever type of rifle. Have a look at what's available because from a factory they aren't all the same size, just like anything else. You've got to find one. And I when people say to me, what rifle should I buy? I said, go to somewhere that has a range and start shouldering stuff.
Yeah. Make sure it fits, make sure it's comfortable. You can bring it up to the shoulder comfortably. I guess, as you say, right-handers are probably more fortunate that lefty there's a lot less availability. But as you say, that's starting to increase. More and more manufacturers are bringing those out. So, but it's hard to find. I know when you go to a gun shop, there's some gun shops have a lot in stock, some don't. So you just got to shop around and find the right fit for you. And then once you found the fit, then you know that's generally, I find most Tikkas are pretty much the same across the different rifle types. So if you got a T3, a T3 Lite, I don't know the new T3Xs, I don't know how they've changed, but I know with the T3s, for instance, I had the T3 Super Varmint and the standard T3 was the exact same fit for me. So I know a Tikka is always going to fit. But if I was going to go and buy a new Tikka now, I'd go and try the T3X or the CTR and see which one fits me perfectly. And if it didn't, I wouldn't buy it.
It's a generalization on my part, but I've found that generally American rifles are a bit shorter than European rifles.
Yeah, I would have to agree on that.
I find that they're not always, but generally the Remington probably being the one that pushes against that.
The Remington 700 is usually a beautiful rifle. I love that rifle.
Yeah, they're a bit longer generally because I hunted with the 700 in the UK, and it was one of the synthetics. I think it was the all weather or something. I can't remember. AWR, I think it was. Right, you and I should probably remember it. It was a synthetic, carbon stock, cerakoted reserve, and I thought that was actually from out of the box. That was a very nice rifle. It was really a nice rifle. It was a great rifle.
So you mentioned there cerakoting. I guess that's probably the next thing that people can select when they're looking at a rifle is the finish of the actual rifle. So you mentioned cerakoting. You can get the old school, which is the bluing, which is not blue, but it's black, but it's that standard sort of.
Depends. It's a very deep blue.
Yeah, but it's generally most of them are black.
No,
I guess. I guess cerakoting is probably the more relatively new way of finishing a rifle. Bluing is probably the old school way, and then obviously you can get other metals as well, like stainless steel. What do you prefer?
Well, it's funny. My last 3 rifles have all cerakoted.
Mm.
So I had my very nice 3006 started life as a stainless. Well, not but European stainless. So not shiny stainless. That
Mm.
they call the stainless. You know, the matte finish stainless. About 3 years ago, it got cerakoted to midnight black, which is about the closest cerakote coming to a blued barrel.
Mm-hmm.
And the action, everything got done that, so that rifle went from a lighter color to a darker color. The Ruger was again matte stainless type finish that got blue, and the CDR is sorry, not blue, got cerakoted black, and the CDR is cerakoted what they call a dark earth, so a brandy coyote style tan cerakote. And one of the reasons why I cerakote my rifles is one, again, being a lefty, I was kind of limited in what I could find. But also, I think it ultimately layers another protection on your rifle.
It's definitely a much hard-wearing surface generally.
And you can scratch it. It does. It's not like, impervious, but it does present another level of protection. I think it does something, and people in Cerakote might be now listening and not very happy with what I'm about to say, but I think it does change the way the barrel heats and cools.
Okay.
I think it does. And the only reason I say that is when I got the Scout Cerakoted, it's how it shot changed.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
Didn't go bad. It changed. Right? And same with the Tika. Again, it didn't go, oh God, that's the end of it. Can't hit with anything. But it changed. It's the way it fired after a few. The way it
Just behaved. Yeah.
The way it behaved in regards to heat changed. I'm wondering if that's something to do with the Cerakote.
That's just the way it disperses heat, I guess.
Yeah, it had a different effect on. It had an effect on heat in regards to the barrel.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
It changed it. It can't exactly explain how it changed it, but it did change it. And I'm pretty sure it did too. So yeah, so I found that was the case. So, which is why I'm very, very concerned with cold bore shooting, because we're hunting. So I went to Nundle and I shot 3 shots. The reason I shot 3 shots was the first 2 shots I killed deer, and when I shot the second deer, I ejected the case and then moved forward. And my son came up and said, where's the case? I went, sorry, mate. So I literally chambered around and fired one into the dirt and said, here's a case. And that was it. So that was my 3 shots for the weekend.
Yeah.
2 an animal, 1 in the dirt, so I could give him a case. And so, that's fundamentally different to someone who's target shooting and things like that. So
absolutely.
So how that rifle performs cold is very important to me. That you go up the Brisbane Valley chasing deer, and then you see that red deer, you want to know what's going to happen, because
want to know exactly where it's going to go.
You've gone from days of weeks of planning, days of preparation, hours of stalking, seconds. It all comes down to this second or two.
Yeah.
So you want that to be what you want that to not be a what if. You don't want to start thinking what if there. So cold is very important to me in a rifle.
And what about barrel condition? And I mean by barrel condition is, do you prefer to keep your rifles clean? Do you clean them after every hunt? Do you keep them dirty?
No, don't clean them after a hunt.
Do you put oil? Do you put any oil down the barrels?
I just hoppies and
And a patch through?
I think I'm using a Rem oil at the moment, Remington thing, but only because someone gave it to me.
Yeah.
I'm not that pedantic about cleaning. I probably lean to the other way. If I was being typically facetious, I would say my rifle is always one shot dirty.
Yeah. Okay.
The last shot cleaned out the stuff before that, so it's always one shot dirty.
So yeah, I like to keep my rifle dirty, as in I don't clean it after every hunt. And after a range session, I'll put a patch through with a bit of Rem oil or something like that, just to make sure it doesn't rust. I'll oil the outside, but otherwise I don't clean it.
Yeah, range is different. Range is different because you're shooting 40, 60, and in fact, I generally, if I'm at now that Belmont's changed and you got to get out of there in 2 hours,
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
When you had time, I used to clean my rifle at the range.
Mm.
I used to do it there, and then I go home and put it away.
Yeah,
I would literally clean it there, clean it there, put it away, and that was done. But yeah, from a hunting situation, no, I don't, because it's one shot.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same.
It's me. That's it. So that's it. I mean, geez, if it requires me to clean after every shot, I'm not shooting deer. I'm shooting, Olympics or something. So I suppose now we're kind of moving to circle back to your question about sights and mounts and so on and so forth. And again, I suppose the underlying question here is, what are you using your rifle for? Has a great deal of influence on your scope, type of scope, and your mounting systems.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, you could decide to do open sights if you wanted to, if you're down the range, and so, the old school, an older school rifle, or maybe a little 22 with some open sights. I know my Morza that I recently sold, the 458, that had the old peep sight with a little hole where you look through. Yeah, they had the peep on it, proper old school World War II style, where you would line up the rear peep sight with the front pin, and that's where you're on. But generally, most people are going to run scopes. I think majority of people hunting or target shooting on a modern rifle will use a scope. It's certainly going to aid in your accuracy and ability to take animals. It just really does extend your capabilities of that rifle. So yeah, most people are going to have a scope. And I guess majority of rifles, people would need some sort of mounting system, i.e., are they going to have rings? Are they going to have bases? Do they need both? The other option is going to be the Picatinny rail that I mentioned earlier. There seems to be a myriad of options out there. What's your go-to mounting?
I tend to want to go low and simple, and uncluttered. So I don't even particularly like the base ring combination. I like a
single unit, yeah.
A single unit that's got it in
weaver tail. I think they call them something like that. Yeah.
It's incorporated. So it's the mounting ring that has an integrated base, so it goes straight onto the rifle, depending on the rifle. So for instance, Ruger, what people don't realize is, and they make, it's a pretty typical mistake with Rugers, is that the rings are different heights because the action is stepped.
Right. Okay.
So if you get it wrong, your rifle, your scope's put down. I can't remember. It's either up or down, but basically there's a back and a front one because they're different heights. I think the back one is taller. It's because it drops down, so they're different heights. So, but yeah, I like so that the integrated system. So and I usually like a 4 grub screw across the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and the single locking grub or whatever it is so it locks onto on an integrated rail in top of the action. I've had rifles with picatinnies, the Scout being one of them. And when we actually built the custom rifle, the Indy, the question they immediately said, "What kind of rail you want?" I said, "I want a rail. I actually don't like rails, and the reason I don't like rails is I don't like the aesthetics of a rail. I just like that really clean line across the top. So that's it for me. So I'm really much a very clean, straight line when it comes to the mounting system. What I'm going to include in there is I'm going to include, and it's changed over time, I must admit. I for the longest time preferred low-powered scopes. So I generally, it was a 1.5 to 5 or a 1 to 6 when I bought this Swaro, but it was low powered because I generally hunt on 2 to 3 power. My last 2 scopes have been like 2 to 10 and 2 to 12 because the multiplier in scopes has changed, has improved.
Yeah.
So you can get a 2 to 10, you get a 5-time multiplier. I must, and admittedly, they're carried generally still on 3 to 4. But when you get to the range, you want to wind them up. You've got that option.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I generally used to stay away from a bigger front objective, but I've slightly changed on that. It just from what I found with the scopes, the fact that once upon a time you kind of, if you want low powered, it was a low powered scope. Now you can kind of get a scope that does both, which is very, very, which is still novel, but also very, very appealing. And then of course you throw in the illuminated reticle, which comes in again. And I again used to, well, I still do. I prefer a simple reticle, but some of the scopes I have now don't have simple reticles, but they work. The German number 4 was.
That's my favorite 4A.
I carried on them for a long time, and it was just like, there it is, target, bank, shoot. And what I find with some of the newer reticles, even though they're more complicated than a German number 4, they still allow that because of their design features, and especially if they've got illuminated reticle.
Yeah.
And like I've got I got 3 now at the moment. I've got 3 Steiner scopes, all with illuminated reticle, and 3 different in the range. So I've got a Predator, a Ranger, and a Night Hunter, I think they call it. And strange enough, the Predator, which is the kind of the lower end of those 3 scopes, its illuminated reticle is not a dot, it's a little cross.
Okay, that's different.
It is fantastic. It's just this, so you've got the scope, and then in the center you've just got this small illuminated cross, and and the I can't think what they call them, the proper name from now, the horizontal lines. I can't remember what they call them now. It's escaped me. They have a proper name, of course, but the ones on the Predator 4 appear thicker to go thinner, and they tend to push your eye into that. It's kind of like you're looking down a tunnel and you look.
Yeah, it's sort of directing your eye.
Yeah, it just pulls your eye, and I found that. So yeah, I those Ranger 6s are a great scope, but those Predator 4, which are cheaper, damn fine scope. 2 to 10. I think it's a 42 front objective, so it's not big. It's low profile. It's pretty compact design. It's got a lovely big eyepiece at the front with lots of eye relief, and you can mount it low to your scope. It's got it doesn't have turrets because I'm not a big fan of turrets. I just like dials. Get them dialed in, screw that cap on, never come off, stay there.
Yeah, I'm the same. I like mine simple. I'm the same. I like mine low. I don't like. I've tried quick detach mounts once, took them off, didn't like them, found they were clunky and caught on clothing and bushes and trees. And I've never tried removing the scope and putting it back on to see if it maintained its point of impact.
Yeah.
I've never tried it. I believe they're very good, but again, I'll go simple, uncluttered. Just I like it. I'm the same. I don't like turrets on my rifle. On my scope. I want to just have it shooting where I know it's going to shoot. I don't want to play with it and adjust it, and keep it simple. That's my
I had worn the worn quick detach on the 3006 with the Swaro for a number of years, and they were really good. They were really good mounts, but I never used them. Quick detach that never moved.
Yeah.
So I think I solved them a little while ago. But yeah, because they just didn't move. So that that it was a great concept. And speaking of that quick detach, when I was on Target, they showed me this Steiner scope that looks like it uses some integrated. It didn't even really get a good understanding of it, but it looks like an integrated detaching mechanism that was actually, and what I mean by integrated, was actually integrated into the scope.
Okay.
So the scope was the thing so there must have been some kind of fixed mounting on the rifle
that it attaches to.
Up and put the scope on.
Okay.
So that so it wasn't like a kind of mount. No, the mount would have been just basically a lug. It was a scope to it. So it'd be interesting to see where that's going in terms of that kind of technology.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess from a rifle perspective, what else could people be considering? What are your thoughts on muzzle brakes? Or
I don't like muzzle brakes.
they're not nice at the range.
The reason I don't like muzzle brakes is I've sat next to people at the range who've got
exactly the same. And I always seem to get sat next to someone with a muzzle brake on. Yeah, they're not very pleasant.
I mean, look, I might have I suppose an old school or a hardened approach to this, but I don't see the value in a muzzle brake on a hunting rifle. I just don't see it. I mean, I can understand if you have a large caliber target rifle and you're shooting it a lot, you might go, I'd like a muzzle brake on this thing. But if you're shooting a hunting rifle, I can't see the point of a muzzle brake. Just can't see it. And I've shot rifles, and so have you, with moderators hanging off the front of them, which are the ultimate muzzle brake. I mean, they do fundamentally change the
absolutely the
rifle. It's quieter, but it's also got this
it's a big heavy
9 to 12 inch tube on the end of it that's basically sucking, just displacing all this energy type thing.
Yeah, but I guess I mean, the shooting that I used to do in the UK there wasn't a lot of walk and stalk. We weren't putting a rifle on our back and going walking through, Pilliga or Severn for 3-4 hours at a time. You were generally walking a couple hundred meters, climbing into a high seat, or walking the edge of a woodland. So you can get away with that extra weight. Plus, it's a much more densely populated area, the UK. Yeah. And you're quite often shooting, with a road behind you or a bridleway or a footpath or something like that. So the impact to your neighbours and to the general public is far more reduced when you're using one of those muzzle brakes. The moderators. Plus your hearing. It's going to save your hearing. But when you're out in the middle of the Pilliga or Severn or wherever you're hunting, you're probably going to shoot 1 or 2 shots. A muzzle brake's not going to help you.
Yeah, I really can't see the benefit of them. And to me, there's more downside than there is benefit.
I'd hate to be carrying a moderator up and down my red block. I'd be broken by the end of it. So.
Well, you I don't know what you do, but so not a big fan of muzzle brakes. Don't really see them as a hunting tool. I'm sure there's someone who would argue against that, but for the type of hunting that I've done for my life, a muzzle brake would be more of a hindrance than a benefit. And I suppose the other thing we got then is we've got the bipods. The funny thing about bipods is it's something that I've experimented with constantly for, I don't know, since I started this, shooting sticks versus bipods, around and around and around and around in circles. And, bipods have got so much better too,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There is a number of really good brands out there, but the Spartan brand is probably the Javelins and stuff like that. That's really, they brought a new level of design and usability to them. The old Harris styles with the big heavy springs, the trapdoor thing, they slap forward and slap back.
Oh yeah, I mean, I carried a Harris on the front of mine for a long time, and then I've upgraded to the Spartan. I just love it because you can have the mounting point fitted to the rifle. You don't have this big, heavy, bulky, metal-bodied bipod on the front, and then you can click it on and off when you need it. I mean, I've shot quite a few animals off a bipod. There's not to say that I couldn't have found a suitable rest, but I had the bipod available to me, so I used it, and it was a solid rest. But being able to, with the Spartan, take it on and off as and when you need it is awesome. And I've actually got the other head that they've got, which is the Davros, which actually fits onto my shooting stick, and so I could use a bipod, a shooting stick, whichever I wanted, with that same adapter on the front of my rifle. It just clips on, so it's a great piece of kit. Although quite often I find I either shoot off a tree or shoot off hand, especially in the thick scrub. You don't have time to get sticks or anything like that out.
That's right. And so look, it's always kind of I'm never sure which one to go for. I alternate, and I think that's because I haven't figured it out yet. And so the one that I moved from a bipod is to shooting sticks. And shooting sticks, no doubt, again, from a static position, they are wonderful things to have. But again, they're another thing you need to carry, and you've got to get out and things like that. So it reflects the situation that you find yourself in. And I've got a nice set of shooting sticks, but I just don't tend to carry them that often.
Yeah, you see, I carry mine, so I use mine for glassing, so I'll use them as a rest for my binos as well. I use them to assist me on steep country, just more of like a walking pole type thing, because mine are the adjustable ones, the Primos that you can go up and down with. So I use them for leverage. I use them for glassing. I use them for shooting off. I put the camera on them as well if I need to. I've got the universal adapter that the camera can fit on, so I can do some videoing. I just find it, but you are carrying it all day. If you want to use them, you got them in your hand the whole time, and you got a rifle and you got a backpack. It's a lot of kit, so you got to be prepared to carry it.
I found that I was putting my shooting sticks in my backpack, and after a day, I'd realised that I'd carried my shooting sticks around all day. At your back, I'll be seeing videos myself, and I can see it's above my shoulder. There's a yoke sticking up there. I'm just taking this thing for a walk. I'm not using it. And and so that's a really important consideration about, and it's really reflective of the type of shooting you find yourself doing.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Because there is certain situations where bipods are just, they're gold, but you've got to be in the right position. You've got to be in the right kind of circumstance. Other times they just get in the way. So you've got to really understand the kind of hunting you're doing when determining if a bipod or shooting sticks or neither is the appropriate for you. And I suppose the final piece of the puzzle then is things like rifle slings. And just like bipods, rifle slings is something that I've gone through so many iterations trying to find the best rifle sling, and I haven't found it yet.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've tried the safari slings. I've tried the standard over the shoulder. I've tried the neoprene ones. I've tried leather ones. There's so many different styles out there. You've really just got to find the one that you're comfortable with.
So on the CTR, I have I think it's Dingo. It's Australian leather sling. And on my 3006, I've got a Holland sling because I bought it from Holland when I was in England. And I found the very best thing to do with the sling is I actually made. I've got to bend up a bit. Got the toaster out and bent up a bit of plastic. And it's a little clip that I can clip on my backpack harness, and so I can just clip the sling into it, so it holds it there. So it
Doesn't
does
slip off the
slide
shoulder.
back a little bit, and so what I'm thinking is I'm going to put another clip on the sling itself, so they
Comes up against it.
Each other and they stay there. And I found that's probably the best for me. It's this sling idea.
Yeah, it isn't. It is annoying when it slips off the shoulder all the time.
It doesn't slip that way because the thing stops. It goes backwards. Like rolls slowly backwards. So I'm going to put something on the sling now, so it locks in place, and that's it. But yeah, I've tried safari slings. I've tried. Haven't ever tried one of the Rhodesian slings. You know, that 3-point weird thing.
Yeah.
That everyone raves about. Haven't tried that. Tried the webbing ones. Gone through them all. A little while ago, I gave away about 5 different slings. I said, "Who wants a sling?" And people, "Oh, well, what kind you got?" "Well, I got this kind. I got this one."
This one, take your pick.
And they all went.
Yeah.
But I just can't. That's one of the things that I'm yet to figure out what I want in that. What kind of sling.
And it'll continue to change. Someone will come up with a new idea and give it a test and see how it goes until you find the right one.
Well, at the moment, because not at the moment, but for a while now, I've been carrying a camera on a tripod, so the sling's become more important in a way.
Definitely, you need your hands. Yeah,
I've got to find that because it's just another item to carry.
Definitely.
I can't think of anything else other than maybe a recoil pad.
Yeah, I do like to carry. I do put a recoil pad on my 308. Is it necessary? Yeah, I think it does help. Adds a little bit of length of pull as well if you've got a shorter stock.
Pull.
And for your larger calibers.
I shot lever action for a very long time, and they traditionally don't have recoil pads. In fact, some of them had brass plates on the back of them. And I don't know. So I find a recoil pad is much more useful as a length of pull than it is to limit recoil.
Yeah, definitely. Unless you've got a brass plate, then there's not much it's going to do, I don't think. But
and the reason for those people wondering why they put brass plates are a hangover from muzzle loaders.
Is that what they can? Yeah.
So when the rifle, who's on
when you're jamming the ball in,
it's a protected rifle when it's on the ground. Okay. Hangover from that, when you literally put the stock on the ground and start pouring the powder down the muzzle, you had to have something to protect the stock because it was literally banging on the ground or on something. So that's what it was. It was a hangover for protection of the stock, and also, of course, then you could use your stock to cave in someone's head when you after your first shot. But that's what it was. It was a hardened up the stock, and in fact, you look at a lot of the antique pistols. They also, the flintlocks especially, they've got that brass around
plates on them.
The grip, because you would use it to clock someone on the head with it just as much as you use it from. So man killer at both ends type thing.
Yeah. Well, you've only got one shot. It's going to take you.
That's it. You only got one shot. Then it's just a very fancy club. And in fact, the British Navy ones they actually used to drill of using the pistol by the barrel with the sword. So you would actually use it to catch and deflect. So you would fight sword and pistol other way. They shoot the pistol, then turn around and use it that way.
Okay, interesting. Yeah,
that was it. For the Navy, that was one of their fighting drills. Use it as a weapon, like a deflection against swords.
Okay.
So very different times. But so with rifles, most hunting rifles come with a recoil pad. Most lever actions don't. It's not a typical thing. And lever action stocks are usually thinner too and shorter, so they're a bit meaner on the shoulder. They do bite or punch a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you're going to buy 45-70 guide gun. If it hasn't got a recoil pad on, you might want to put one on.
It's going to kick.
It's
Yeah, the
short
45.
and that's going to boot and it's going to hurt. So, but yeah, that's another consideration. And then there's a whole range of types of recoil pads, and then there's even when they put the capsule in the stock itself.
They put the counterweights.
Basically to absorb energy.
I think if you need to do that, the calibers are the big.
I've seen mechanical recoil pads with like spring systems in them and things like that. So there's all sorts of different types of ways of recoil.
But if you need that for a hunting rifle, you're shooting a too big a caliber.
That's right. Yeah. Well, again, if the recoil pad is the thing that's making your mind up about shooting that rifle or not, then maybe you're not shooting the right rifle, because rifle weight, density, all that stuff has just as much impact on reducing felt recoil as anything else.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's right. The weight of the rifle, it's just absorption of, it's just absorbing energy and stuff like that. So these are all the things that you need to consider when you're buying that rifle.
And also from a physical stature as well. You're not going to go, if you're a big burly bloke, you don't really need a very light, thin little rifle. It's not going to fit you very well. And opposite as well, if you're, quite small or a petite female, etc., you're not going to go and buy a big, heavy Magnum caliber and not expect it to boot your shoulder.
It's going to do what it's going to do. So, you need to be aware of that and understand that.
Yeah, it needs to be the right rifle for you. I think it's got to be the right fit. It's got to be comfortable. And it's got to be, the right caliber as well. It's all got to come together, and it's going to become this package that's just perfect. When you pick it up to your shoulder, it should just feel right. And if you don't feel it, try another one until you find that.
Right. And the segue right back to the very beginning, it's going to ultimately come down as what is the intended use here?
Definitely.
And intended use is about intent. So you can use a target rifle to do anything with, but it's going to primarily be best at one thing as opposed to the other thing. So like I said, when I had that 223, I had a Tikka 223 in the standard Hunter. Okay. And that was a very serviceable and very fun range gun. It shot well. It was accurate, it was cheap, it was light, it was easy. But it wasn't really a target rifle. But then again, I wasn't really target shooting in competition. I was just having fun, and it was perfect for that kind of usage. If I was going to shoot competition, I probably wouldn't have got that configuration. Vice versa, if I was going to hunt, I would, it was more the right configuration. So that comes down to, and then you ask yourself, well, what kind of hunting you're doing? So if you're hunting from where you can primarily take a rest on something like that, you're not carrying rifle great distances, not walking over, up and down dales, then you can have a heavier barreled, more target varmint style rifle. If you're doing the hard yards, you don't want your rifle to be slowing you down.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, it's come down to that intent of what you intend to do with it.
Absolutely.
I can't think of anything else, mate.
No, me neither. I think that's a good place to end it.
I think that's rifle. So if you're listening and you've got questions, you've got observations, you want to tell me that I've got something completely wrong, that's okay. Leave a comment, get in touch with us. But that, folks, I think, unless you got anything else, Jono?
No, nothing else from me, mate. I think we call it there.
I think it's the compendium to Calibre Craziness. And because Ian's not here, we rip through this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't have to answer questions like, what's a trigger? Okay.
Cool. Thanks, mate. Good night.
That's it from me.
Good night.
Adios, mate. And next time.